Welcome back, everyone, to Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron.
Hey, welcome back, guys.
And today, it's not just Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron, it's Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron and Jen.
Woo!
Welcome, Jen.
Thank you guys so much. Very excited to be here.
Jen's joining us for our review of Moon Knight, the Disney Plus show. First 3 episodes have dropped, and we have watched and dissected, and we're here to give you our impressions of the first half of the series. And so with that, Cam, I'll start with you.
My overall impression is I'm loving it so far. I waited until the first 3 episodes came out because I really wanted to get kind of bigger picture as an introduction, because I feel like with all these Disney Plus shows, every episode doesn't really have enough, and I'm always left wanting more. And I think that actually sometimes affects the experience. So I really wanted to go into this and have all 3 episodes to get a really good kind of introduction to it. And I think that worked because I really enjoyed it. I love how kind of disconnected it is from the MCU so far, especially what we've seen lately. There isn't really any multiverse stuff yet, as far as we know. That could come later. But the action is really cool, and just the concept of these Egyptian gods and the visuals, all the kind of Indiana Jones style temples and adventuring and that sort of thing is really cool. So overall, I'm enjoying it, and I think it's kind of a fun twist on the superhero formula so far.
Yeah, and Jen, your first impressions. I know you're coming at it from a different perspective. I think each of us are coming at it from a sort of slightly different perspective, but what were your thoughts?
Yes, so I had no idea who the character was before watching the series. Ron, you just asked me to take a look at it with you, and we watched it. I did watch the other Marvel shows that were on and really enjoyed them on Disney Plus. But I also had an introduction to the characters beforehand by watching Avengers and some of the other Marvel movies first. So this character is brand new. I had no background on it. And although I do like the show, I have to say I don't love it. I feel like I'm missing a lot of information that might be inside information. Cam, I know you said before that you had looked at the comics and you were kind of familiar with it. And we're really excited to see the different changes and, how they made this a little different for, this particular show. I feel like I just have a lot of questions, I guess. I need to watch more. I think it would have been better if I had rewatched everything too before maybe coming on. But my first impression, like I said, I do like it. I just don't love it. I need more information.
All right. I think my overall impressions are somewhere in between. I like it, but it hasn't totally hooked me so far. To echo some of your thoughts, Cam, love the visuals, love the sort of just the whole dark Moon Knight sort of vibe, all of the Middle Eastern and Egyptian culture and music and everything that they're working into it is really cool. I haven't been totally hooked by Oscar Isaac as yet. I think I like him as an actor. I think he's doing a great job, particularly the split between the characters that he has to maintain is really good, but I didn't love him in Star Wars as Poe Dameron. He just doesn't make as strong an impression on me as some of the other leads in the MCU at large and certainly the Marvel shows. So overall, I'm in that same space of like, not love. I did have a chance to watch the first 3 episodes in sync after watching them week by week. Definitely that improved my experience. I liked it more, but I'm still waiting to get really sucked in. And I don't know if, Cam, if you want to speak to that. So Jen had no background with Moon Knight at all. I never read the comics, but I loved the character, because your dad, my brother, was big comic book collector when he was young, so I was familiar with Moon Knight, loved the character, and was excited for this show, but have never really read the comics, and you actually delved a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I wanted to, since Moon Knight is kind of a more obscure character, I wanted to kind of get a sense of his origin and how the comics are. And because he's a obscure character too, it means that there's not a whole lot of history to catch up on. I didn't read every single Moon Knight issue, but I kind of got a good sense of each kind of era, and they've made a lot of changes over the years. I think the show is purposefully trying to separate that overt Batman connection, but originally he was kind of this, he had these personalities, these characters that he would play, and one of them was Stephen Grant, who was this billionaire playboy kind of with a bat cave under his mansion and everything else. And then he had these other characters that he would go into to gain information, and then he would ultimately act on that information as Moon Knight. Now, obviously, they're changing it a little bit here and putting it, or obviously they're changing it a little bit here and kind of incorporating this like schizophrenia almost, or multiple personality disorder vibe, and that came a little bit later in the comics because there were so many retcons and so many changes to his character and his origin over the years, because different authors did different things, that they eventually just kind of decided, let's make him kind of going crazy after all these different roles that he's played. So I like that they are starting from the beginning and incorporating all of that into it. And because I have this knowledge of the comics, I can kind of see where they're going with the plot, and I know a little bit. I mean, obviously I don't know exactly where they're going to be going, but I can kind of tell a couple of reveals I think that they're going to be going on. And I actually do think that they might quell some of your criticism. So what are some of the more deeper thoughts that you have about what's kind of holding it back?
Well, I was just going to say, Jen, you had some good thoughts about just how in some cases you felt like we were getting some points beaten to death, and then at some points we weren't getting enough information.
Definitely, yeah. I felt like a lot of times, I think when Mark Spector was talking to Khonshu and he was like defending his wife from becoming, the next Avatar, I mean, it was implied, then it was spoken, and then it was reiterated later, and I felt like it was very redundant. Like, I think we got the point immediately. However, I have a ton of questions about his multiple personalities, which was new to me to watch. Is he Stephen Grant and his other personality is Mark Spector, or vice versa? Has he always been Mark Spector and now he had this split personality? I like what you said, Cam, about him using it to gather information and use it maybe for investigations or, to help people. But that doesn't come across yet. It just seems like you said, he's a schizophrenic. So I'm curious to see how that develops as the series goes on, and that might answer some more of my questions with that.
Yeah, so deeper thoughts for me, as I said, I love the aesthetic. When they have those shots of Moon Knight running across the top of a building with the moon, and
right,
all of that. I love his costume, and the fact that they came up with that idea for the show of having him like summon the costume and it being sort of like this manifestation of Khonshu. And then obviously when he wears the, what is it called, the Mr. Moon Knight,
Mr. Knight, yeah,
three-piece suit.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
I liked that, yeah.
That is really cool. I think some of the things that are giving me pause are just around just sort of, grounding myself and orienting myself. And I know, they're purposely obscuring and obfuscating some things because of the multiple personalities and things. But a couple things that come to mind are like, who knows what where in terms of what Mark knows. Obviously, Stephen knows nothing. What the other gods that they started to work in episode 3 and the avatars of those gods. I was kind of really threw me that sort of, they were doing this sort of trial against Arthur Harrow, or putting him on trial without him being there. Of course, then they summoned him. And I was like, well, can't the gods just look and see that he's trying to dig up, what's the evil god's name?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Atuan, or whatever the evil god, what her name is. How come they can't see that? Because they're all knowing and all seeing. And then obviously we can see that Khonshu has some limitations, like he can sort of affect the weather and things like that, but he otherwise can't manifest himself in the real world. And yet, on the flip side, Arthur Harrow's character, he doesn't ever seem surprised by anything. He seems to be the one person, god or mortal or whatever, that's clued into kind of everything. Whenever Khonshu's like manipulating the sky or something like that, he's like, I know what's going on there. So it's just a little bit of like, who knows what, where. I was a little bit thrown off by when they meet with, who's the character who has in episode 3?
Oh, that circus thing, Anton Mogart.
Mogart, and rest in peace the actor who played him, who unfortunately tragically passed away in a skiing accident shortly after filming his Moon Knight scenes. But that whole thing with with the jousting,
Yeah,
the
I
shirtless
couldn't
jousting, or
tell
whatever
what
they
they
were
were
doing, and then
doing.
they were having a big party, disco party. But then his artifacts were out there for perusal, and then that whole thing was just a little confusing, just who or what they were and what was going on. So some of that. I think also Mark Spector / Steven's relationship with Layla, just quite frankly, I don't find them to have a whole lot of chemistry. I don't know, Jen.
I agree. I thought the same thing. I do like Oscar Isaac in that role, though. I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I really like his character and what he's doing with it. But I agree. I like Layla's character as well. I just feel like they have no chemistry watching them together. It's very hard to believe, even when he's in Mark Spector's persona, that they actually are together. I feel like that's an odd match.
Or that they were, and it gets into that whole thing of like, well, when did he leave her? And,
right.
I know they produced the divorce papers, and there was that whole thing, but that whole, and they tried to have this like little schmoopy moment with them on the rowboat going down the Nile when they were going to visit whatever that dude's name is.
Yeah, I just think I almost wonder if having this kind of balancing act between these two characters is kind of taking away some of the connection between Oscar Isaac's Mark Spector and Layla. But I also kind of feel like we haven't quite seen enough of them together yet to really get a good sense. And I also think that depends a lot on how the backstory kind of ends up unfolding too, because we, like kind of Jen was saying, we don't know where Mark Spector and Stephen Grant kind of fit in. We don't know if one of them is who existed first, and right, and how long this has been going on, and so I think that in particular that kind of stretches believability, like how long he was able to see that he was getting up and leaving in the middle of the night because he has all these things to kind of alert him, but he still wasn't aware about any of it was going on, just that it was. So like what changed that now he's able to kind of see? So I think there's a lot of questions that I hope are going to be answered, along with the kind of stuff about the gods. And on that note too, I think in the comics they eventually make a distinction that Khonshu is more of like an interdimensional like entity as opposed to an actual god like Thor. So I almost wonder if these gods and their avatars aren't even gods at all, but it's just these kind of entities that are just manipulating things on Earth and have just enough power to like do certain things but don't have the full kind of effect of a god. So that's kind of the direction I think they're going to be moving in, but we'll have to see.
Now between the Asgardians and the cosmic stuff and the multiverse stuff, right, and then now these supernatural Egyptian gods and the Eternals,
and the Greek gods too coming up in Thor.
Oh, right. So it's going to be amazing how definitely the first 3 phases. Are we in phase 4 now? Mm-hmm. The first 3 phases of Marvel.
We're in phase 4. Yeah.
Everything outside of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Asgardians was fairly grounded, and now all bets are off. Everything's totally wide open. So it'll be interesting to see how they pull it all together, just to make it all believable enough. One other just sort of point I thought of is when in the transition. So like when Stephen Grant wakes up and he's in Switzerland and running around being shot at, and then he wakes up and he's back in bed. And likewise when Mark Spector and Khonshu decide, okay, now we've got to go to Egypt and track down. That name of the other god is escaping all of us.
I know, I can't remember.
But when they're going to go track down Arthur Harrow and his dig site, they go to Egypt, and all of a sudden Mark wakes up and he's sitting by the bed with a bottle of whiskey and looks out the window. So it's implied almost like there's this teleportation, driven by Khonshu going on. But is that just Mark / Steven's experience? And the body itself is actually getting on a plane and flying there, and it is 2 weeks later, or
right? Yeah, I kind of got the sense that that's just their experience, and that one of them or Khonshu is actually like getting the body and moving them, because they specifically went to that like storage unit where there was a cot and everything else. So that seems like it's kind of a layover place for Mark Spector as he gets ready to go on his adventures and stuff. So I got the sense that it's just kind of it's almost like a missing time kind of thing where Stephen Grant just kind of snaps awake and doesn't remember half of it, but Mark has been controlling it, and it's not necessarily like a teleportation. But Khonshu does seem to have the ability to teleport, so I don't know. Yeah.
Actually, too, there was the scene where Stephen Grant goes to meet that girl from his work at the restaurant, and he calls her and he says like, "Oh, Friday night, I'm ready for my big steak dinner," and she's like, "No way, man, it's Sunday." Like, you blew me off. That kind of made me think too the same thing, that I think that Khonshu might be kind of involved somehow, and it is just his reality. It's like he wakes up and realizes it several days later.
Right. So maybe the body. That's the only way to describe it. The body got on a train from Switzerland and came back to London, and then that's why it's 3 days later.
Right.
That whole thing. And I know, Jen, you also thought, getting into some of the performances too, you really liked Ethan Hawke.
I did. He looks creepy.
Yeah,
the long hair,
he's one of my
the facial
favorite actors.
expressions, kind of drawn and stuff. I did like his character too. I haven't seen him in anything in a while.
Well, Cam, touch on that, because you've become a huge fan of Ethan Hawke, and I think it's because I think Jen and I, probably being a little bit older, remember him more in his like kind of heartthrobby lead actor days, but more recently he's done a ton more genre
stuff like horror. He's been in tons of horror movies and character pieces and stuff, and he's always great in everything he does. And so I was glad to see that they incorporated him into the MCU as kind of a random character too. Like we were saying, this character does appear in the comics, but he's just kind of a one-off random villain that just kind of appears and disappears. He's certainly not a recurring villain of Moon Knight's, and it's almost the same thing that they did with Aldrich Killian in Iron Man 3, because that character was just on one single page of the comics too, but they expanded him into this whole villain role. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I hope that they go into some of the other Moon Knight villains eventually, because he has almost like a Batman, a lot of wild villains. So, but yeah, he's been great, Ethan Hawke.
I mean, so I've had more reservations about this show coming into it than some of the other shows, but I think I remember, I loved Loki, but I think the first a couple of episodes, I was kind of like, not sure where this is going, and that turned out to be one of my favorites. And on the flip, I loved Falcon and Winter Soldier, the first 3 or 4 episodes, or maybe most of the whole thing, but the finale kind of fell pretty flat for me. So I'm going into the last 3 episodes really excited that it's gonna finally just reach that tipping point for me where it really sucks me in and captivates me. And I'm definitely going to wait. I think Jen and you and I are going to wait and watch the last 3 episodes.
Together, definitely.
Yeah, I think that improves the experience a lot.
So can I ask you guys a question before we wrap this up too?
Yeah.
So do we think that Moon Knight is going to be multi-series? Are they going to do it again? How is Moon Knight going to fit into the MCU with the future movies and things that are coming out? I know that they're very well-timed with these shows and how they're all related. So what do you guys think?
That's a good question, because obviously it's been pretty disconnected now, and there doesn't seem to be any like hints that there's gonna be any connection soon. I hope that it's gonna be a multiple season kind of thing.
Well, I will say that I heard that just recently. I read that Moon Knight's a one-shot deal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Similar to, and they quoted some other, like Hawkeye. Both Moon Knight and Hawkeye are going to be one.
Oh, that's a bummer. I thought they were. I thought it was going to be an ongoing thing, because there's still so much to so many cool villains.
Who knows? Everything could change, but that was one of the producers or directors mentioned that. One thing too that I just remember before the show, but when the show just started filming, they had this photo of oh God, why can't I? Where do I go with these actors' names? Hulk.
Mark Ruffalo.
Thank you. Jeez. Brain fart. But yeah, they had a picture of Mark Ruffalo and Oscar Isaac in Bucharest or someplace where they were filming.
Right.
And so I thought Mark Ruffalo was going to make a cameo in this, but maybe the two of them are going to be cameoing in some
Right, yeah. Could be
other
something
show.
else. Yeah.
So I have a feeling Moon Knight will show up in other shows and maybe movies down the road, but I think this might be it for his show, but who knows?
Yeah, that's a bummer. I didn't know that, but I hope that they change that. And Moon Knight was in the Avengers very briefly
Right.
in the comics, so anything's possible. But
They can always pull him in.
mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
I think that covers everything I wanted to say.
yeah. So we're excited. We're cautiously optimistic for the second half
Mm-hmm.
of Moon Knight. We'll be back to wrap up the second half of the series with you guys. So that is a wrap on episode 1 through 3 of Moon Knight. All right, next up is a Sony Marvel film. So not a
Ooh.
not a Marvel Cinematic Universe film officially. It's a Marvel Studios in association with Sony, or backwards. The new film Morbius. Morbius, the living vampire of comic book fame. That was another character I really liked as a kid. I don't think I ever really remember reading it, but I remember seeing a lot of the images of the character when I was a kid and thinking he was really cool. But Cam, thoughts on Morbius? I just saw it a few days ago.
Yeah, it's a little bit fresher in your mind. I saw it a couple of weeks ago, but there were definitely some unforgettable scenes, but probably not for the reason that they were expecting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it should be any surprise that I thought this movie was terrible, although I did have kind of a blast seeing it with my friends. We were kind of laughing at some of the scenes, and overall, I think you can just see the huge difference in quality of from compared to Marvel Studios films, and I'm just shocked that Sony keeps trying these stupid ideas. Like who, I have they're like from the very beginning, it's kind of a flawed concept because it's pretty much the exact same character as Venom. He's just the guy that gets possessed by some beastly or demonic thing and has to control himself, kind of thing. And it's not. He's always been a side character for Spider-Man mostly. He has some kind of solo outings every so often, but it's just kind of a strange choice. And you can tell that they were just like dusting the bottom of the barrel for something they could make a solo film out of to try to connect it to Spider-Man. And they tried to. I don't know if they did, but I have a specific point I want to make, but I want to hear what your thoughts are first.
Sure. Overall, didn't like it that much. Did not really like it at all. It wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, but overall, my impression was just, again, it just seems like, what is the point of this movie? It seemed like just one long, a 90-minute character introduction is how I would describe this film. Like, it was all set up of how he got this way, how he became the vampire, and and now he's got to control himself and figure out what he's going to do, and then the movie was over. Like, and I think I said to you, like in MCU movies, and I think back to Captain America: The First Avenger, like in the first act of that, they set up Steve Rogers, who he was, etc., and then he goes and gets the super soldier serum, and then he's off on this adventure, and the adventure is the rest of the movie. This movie just sort of ended after, he has all his angst and issues with his friend and everything else, but basically the movie is just him sort of fully becoming the vampire and then having this like existential crisis over drinking blood or not drinking blood, and then the end. So that's my initial thoughts.
Right, yeah, no, I mean, I pretty much completely agree. It's funny that you say that there was really no point to this movie, because that's kind of what the specific point that I came out making, like right after we came out, is the film starts with kind of this like scene that it kind of sets up the movie, but each subsequent scene is just trying to justify the previous, like why the previous scene existed, without there being an actual like greater motive or arc to where the story is going. So it's like, oh well, this just happened, so we have to explain that, but then they have to explain that explanation, and it's just on and on until they manage to make a full movie. But there was no real character. It was all just explanation. Like there's this whole I don't even want to call it a subplot because it's more just these two goofy detectives that just are there to explain everything that's going on, and it's not even a mystery plot because in the first scene that they're introduced, they're like, oh, what are these bite marks on these guys? It could be a vampire. And then they figured it out by then, and then it's just them like going through each scene after it happens, like explaining exactly what happened, and that was one of the biggest travesties of that movie is those two characters.
Right, they really served no purpose, and they just walked around, and you sort of knew who. It was no surprise who did what, you know, as far as any of that. But yeah, I mean, what can I go to next? I mean, overall, I thought the performances were good. I know people have very polarizing opinions about Jared Leto. I don't even remember the last thing I saw him in, if anything. But I thought he was fine. He did okay. But again, there was just not a lot of script for him to. There was just like no story, you know. So all there was to just react to himself being sick, and then react to himself going through the experiment, and then react to, oh, now I'm a vampire, and that was the whole movie.
Right, and
Matt Smith's character.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to cover off on Matt Smith. I thought he was good. They kind of just had him playing almost like his Doctor Who character, just this like kind of crazy, over the top, eccentric British rich guy. And so I thought he did a great job, but again, there just wasn't a whole heck of a lot for him.
Right. Well, actually, that's
yeah.
exactly what I was going to say is they almost like kind of assumed like, oh, Morbius is the main character and he helps these people, so people are going to automatically connect with him. But as a result, they ended up putting more effort into Matt Smith's character because it feels like he actually had like a backstory and kind of a reason for becoming who he was, whereas Morbius just was kind of moving through the movie, not really having any greater like sense of purpose to it other than just reacting to things. And as a result, I just ended up liking Matt Smith a lot more. I thought Jared Leto was okay. I didn't think he was great, especially considering like you always hear about all this ridiculous quote unquote method stuff that he tries to do, which ends up just being, it's just him being a dick. It's not actually anything. like did you hear that he insisted on like using his crutches and slowly like hobbling to the bathroom on set every time he had to go to the bathroom, to the point where they had to make a deal with him that someone would wheel him around in order to speed up his bathroom breaks because it was taking too long. And it's just like, it's just not worth it because that does not come through at all. It just comes like he did fine, but he was mostly just reading his lines. Nothing came out like as anything special. Whereas I actually thought Matt Smith was really funny and charismatic even though he was a bad guy. But and he has his one scene where he's using his legs and he's dancing everywhere. I thought that was hilarious. And one thing I thought was one really odd choice they made with his character, though, is at the beginning they introduce him as Lucian, and which is a really kind of cool vampire name. But then Jared Leto's character, he was younger, it was a little kid, but he decides that he's Milo for no real reason, and they call him Milo throughout the rest of the film, and there's no real point to that. Like I kind of was expecting Matt Smith to almost reject that name and start using Lucian, but then it only comes back at the very end when Jared Leto's I gave you the name. Right.
And and then when he dies, he whispers goodbye, Lucian, or
right,
sorry,
right.
Whatever he says.
But it's even have that? Why not just call him Lucian or Milo in the first place
and just be done with it? Yeah,
right.
There was no point to that. And so going back to the whole setup, right? They gave Matt Smith, kind of getting beat up in the back when he was at the orphanage or whatever the heck it was, and then kind of feeling like Jared Leto's character feeling like Morbius was the favorite and all that. So he has more motivation for what he does. And the second thing I'll say, and I think one of the things that sort of neutered Jared Leto and the Morbius character was just they couldn't decide whether he was going to be a good guy or a bad guy, and that really comes to roost in the post-credit scenes that I know we'll get to.
Right.
But he just like, it's like, okay, is he going to become like Matt Smith was, presumably an okay guy that got seduced by the whole experience of becoming a vampire and just leaned into it and became a vampire and became a villain. Jared Leto's character is like, it's almost like, it's like Sony wants him to be evil, and I haven't seen the Venom movies, but it seems like it's the same with that. It's like they sort of want you to sympathize with him, but then they kind of want him to be a villain, and then they maybe even kind of need him to be a villain for where it seems like the crazy place that they want to take this whole story in future movies. But it's like, is he gonna become bad or is he gonna become good? I mean, like, what, or is he gonna like fight this off and be and try to stay on the right side of, or whatever, morality or whatever you want to call it, or is he just going to lean into it and be a vampire? And they don't answer that question at all throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, that's kind of the main question of the movie, but they don't end up answering it. Well, it's funny because kind of along those same lines is, I could never tell if like what the real problem he was having was, so he was drinking the fake blood because he needed the real blood, but I couldn't tell if the real blood made him more powerful, or if it seemed to do different things depending on what the plot needed. Obviously, sometimes it seemed like if he didn't have the blood, then he would turn into a feral vampire, but then there were times when he drank the blood and turned into a feral vampire. So I don't know. It just seemed like completely cobbled together, and not much thought was put into it.
Yeah, it was very inconsistent. But yeah, it seemed like the fake blood only lasted so long. But then I remember him saying something about the real blood, made him want to hunt and made him want to eat people. And all this stuff. So that's the other reason why he didn't want the real blood. Overall the visuals were pretty solid.
Yeah, I thought visually it was pretty okay. I mean, one thing I like in terms of the quality of the visuals, like the CGI I thought was solid, but like one actual visual that I didn't like just aesthetically was him flying. There was that scene.
Yeah.
There was that scene when he was like about to fight Matt Smith in the subway, but then like that weird like stuff went around him, like the
wind
wave,
the wind
stuff that
blowing
they
around
didn't
him,
really explain, and then he just kind of lifts up and takes off in front of the train and just kind of glides away, and I thought that was so funny. I burst out laughing, and it was supposed to be this like intense crazy scene, but like there was no, like Matt Smith was coming at him and he just lifts up like a leaf on the wind. It was so strange.
Well, and that's the thing, it's like it was supposed to probably seem like it was going to be this like really interesting sort of way that vampires fly, I guess, but yeah, it just was like he's looking at this strange wind that starts to blow, and there was no explanation why it started to blow. I guess because he needed it to. Right. And then he just jumps into the wind and gets taken off by a breeze. So is that how he flies? Like
that's what it made it seem like, and that kind of speaks towards a bigger issue I had with the movie is they went out of their way to. I mean, in the comics, they were pretty faithful, I guess, to the comic origin where he uses blood from a vampire bat, so he's not technically a real vampire, but he just kind of has those abilities. But then why have all of these supernatural powers that come with it? Because it seems like if they're going in a more scientific direction, then he wouldn't be able to fly or that sort of thing. But then obviously he is. And then one of the most ridiculous things is at the very end he defeats Matt Smith by like I don't know, summoning a bunch of bats and like blasting them out of his hand at him, and there was no like explanation or any sort of pretense to that power at all. Yeah, it just happens.
Right. It just came out of nowhere. And then why couldn't Matt Smith match it or fight it off? Because isn't he the same? And wasn't Matt Smith by the end arguably more powerful since he was drinking all the blood? Yeah, it just goes to that and then giving him the shot of iron to give him hemochromatosis, and that's how he died. And I was like, that's pretty apropos since I have that. But I was like, wow, weird. Note to self: I guess I can kill a vampire.
Yeah, really. Yeah, if you ever get up against a vampire, I guess you're safe.
But just to pull on that thread, and since I think we're getting to the end of the movie, which in the whole post-credit thing, but at the climax of the movie, and just that whole idea that you just brought up of, are they is he a scientific vampire or is he a supernatural vampire? And, the whole idea, it seemed to be through the movie, was that you were a scientific vampire. But that said, everybody who was attacked by Morbius or Milo or Lucian or whoever he was, died until the very end, when he has that weird scene with, and I apologize for forgetting the actor's name who played his love interest. She did fine with what they gave her. She was very good. But then she, tells him to drink her blood at the end since she was going to die anyway, and he does. And then one of the final scenes, one of the many final confusing scenes in this movie, is they show her eyes open. So she's clearly woken up, and he's sired her, to borrow Buffy, the Vampire Slayer lore, into a vampire. And I'm like, where did that come from? Nobody else turned into a vampire.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense either.
But
that didn't even occur to me.
They couldn't decide, is he a killer? Isn't he a killer? Because how they tried to, the FBI doofuses they almost sort of excused him killing the mercenaries. And again, it's like this whole theme running through is like they didn't want to fully commit to making him a bad guy or a good guy. It was just this weird middle ground he's in for the whole movie. Right. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. Well, there. I think there's something to be said for, like, I think you can do a kind of switching back and forth, and you mentioned the Venom movies. I think they do. I'm not a big fan of those movies, but they do that a lot better, I think. Mainly because they're not trying to really position him as necessarily. I mean, they are trying to position him as a good guy, but like, I think Venom is its own kind of character, so they kind of have that to play off of, and Tom Hardy and Venom can talk back and forth and that, but obviously that they don't have that here. And also, you mentioning his love interest, I can't remember the character's name either, to be honest, but it's funny, while we were watching the movie, I was thinking, well, this movie's pretty bad, but at least there isn't an awful forced romance, and the female character is just kind of a sidekick as opposed to a romance. And as soon as that thought left my mind and went out into the ether, that introductory scene where they kiss on the top of the building or whatever it was, that played, and like, as soon as I thought that, and that was when I was just like, okay, I'm done.
I wasn't buying that, and there's no way, especially whether she was interested in him originally or not, there was no way after he turned into that thing that she was going to hook up with him. Like, it just didn't make any sense. Yeah. So that brings us to the close of the film.
The credits.
Was very confusing, and so lay it on us, Cam, about the post-credit scene.
Well, I think my theory is that at one point Sony wanted to try to force this into the MCU by having some scene where Michael Keaton's character gets let out of prison, and then presumably meets Morbius in the MCU, which kind of ties everything together. But I think obviously somewhere along the line that was stopped, and I'm not sure if Marvel stopped it, or I almost wonder if we lucked out by having Spider-Man No Way Home come first, because that put a solid cap on kind of the MCU Spider-Man for right now, and then they had to go and change. Whereas I wonder if Morbius had come out first, if the original scene had been in. But as it stands, there's the big crack in the sky that we see at the end of No Way Home after Doctor Strange tears open the multiverse. And then there's this really bad shot of just like Michael Keaton appearing in the cell, and presumably he's been transported from the MCU to the Morbius verse or whatever. and then there's this really just ridiculous scene that it just keeps going on where they try to explain, like, oh, Adrian Toomes just appeared in the cell, and because nobody knows who he is, he just gets to go free. And so then, as if that wasn't insulting enough, they have this other scene where clearly they didn't get Michael Keaton to actually be there, but they shot it probably after everything had gone down, and where Michael Keaton is just like, I don't know why I'm here, but I think it has something to do with Spider-Man, We
I
should
know, but
team
could
up.
they have come up with any worse dialogue?
The
Oh my
dialogue
God.
was so awful, and then obviously, and then Jared Leto's just like, interesting, and then that's how it ends. It's just like,
Which again, what is that? So it's like, so are we going to team up? Obviously, it seems like they're alluding to like a Sinister Six kind of thing or something like that.
Right.
But it was just like who wrote the dialogue? Even when he first appears, this isn't my jail cell.
Right.
You know?
It's just so
And then,
on the nose and awful.
The whole and then, but nobody knows who he is. And then where did he? So then the other thing too is okay. So he gets out of jail. Where did he get his tech from? Because in the Sonyverse, like, you know, the Battle of New York never happened.
Oh right, yeah, that was all made from wreckage of Chitauri stuff and everything else.
Right, and even if it's not Stark tech, because you know it doesn't appear that there's a Tony Stark in the Sonyverse. It just was like, and again, and it just put another cap on this whole thing. Okay, Jared Leto might be joining a Sinister Six, so then, okay, so now he's a villain, but
right.
he wasn't a villain, or he is a villain. It just was like, God Almighty, that. And like I said, I think I said to you, that post-credit scene actually made the movie worse.
Oh yeah.
Like the movie that preceded it was even stupider because of this post-credit scene. Oh my God.
Yeah, so, that was ridiculous. I mean, I have to say I did enjoy watching it, but only
it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible, and it was just a fun movie to kind of watch and see where they would go next, because it seemed like any real logic was kind of thrown out the window.
And the actor's name, it's on the tip of my tongue, who played their sort of mentor guy in the clinic.
Oh yeah. Oh crap, I can't. It's kind of like an Irish or like Gaelic name or something.
Yeah,
so it's kind of hard to
Richard
pronounce.
Is it something like that? Jared Harris. Wow. That just
yeah.
And I loved him in Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Moriarty.
Game of Shadows. And I liked him in everything he did, but I mean, he was so wasted in this movie. But he's always good. But everybody else, it was just, this movie was just a total mess. And any final thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of, in a lot of ways, really highlights how Marvel was able to move past the kind of antiquated, older superhero formula that was so based in origins, and now, like, even, I mean, I don't think Morbius would have been a great movie even if it had come out like prior to the MCU existing,
right.
But it definitely has a lot more in common with like Daredevil, with Ben Affleck, or Elektra, right. Or what's another? I don't want to say Blade, because Blade is good, but it almost is similar kind of, like Blade and X-Men and all of those kind of had the same kind of elements, but were able to be elevated from other stuff. But this is definitely on like the lower tier, like 2004 direct to DVD kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough said about Morbius. It's been here finally, after we've been seeing trailers for it for
I know
2.5 years.
Oh well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, one more story before we finish up. My friends and I were watching some Morbius stuff before we went to see the movie, like promotional stuff, like interviews, and we were laughing because the interview we were watching was from a year prior, and they were joking in the interview about how they had already filmed it a year before that, and it was taking a while to come out. So like this was really delayed, and I honestly forgot that it was delayed that much. I didn't think. I thought they shot it during the pandemic, actually, but I guess not.
Yeah, no, definitely was I think it was like Black Widow. It was kind of done and waiting to come out, and they delayed it.
Right. Yeah, I didn't realize it was delayed for that long.
All right, well, that's a wrap on Morbius, unfortunately. So
please,
yeah. But a lot of exciting things to come. Obviously, we're going to do the second half of Moon Knight, and then is Miss Marvel next, I think, after that, possibly for the Disney Plus shows, and then
Obi-Wan.
Oh, Obi-Wan is coming out as well. Looking forward to that. Obviously, Doctor Strange. We're only a couple weeks away. That is going to be phenomenal. At least I hope.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
It looks amazing. Thor. We just got the teaser trailer for Thor today as we were recording.
Yeah, that was great.
That looks amazing. So tons of stuff to get the taste of Morbius.
Yeah, really.
Morbius, the living vampire, out of our psyche.
Not anymore. He's a dead vampire, dead on arrival.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks for listening, folks, and we will see you soon.
Have a good one, guys.